Hello there. For everyone missing the cat cameos, here's a cat cameo. Hi, buddy. If you want to talk about Moka Pots today, you are welcome to have at it. Okay, but in reality, you do have to exit the scene. Today we're going to be talking about a classic brewer that is near and dear to my heart. Now, a lot of these older, what I'm calling classic brewers, are things that you don't see used as commonly in like modern coffee brewing and espresso. However, there is a reason that they are so traditional and so iconic, and I think it's really fun to look at these brewers and figure out how to get some pretty tasty coffee from them. So, with that being said, today we're going to be talking about none other than the Moka Pot. Our goal today is to talk about where the Moka Pot comes from. We're going to be talking about the different components of a Moka Pot, how to brew with it, and then also some additional tips and tricks and things you can play around with once you've got the basics down to potentially improve your cup or really dial it into your own liking. Now, the Moka Pot comes in all sorts of shapes and colors nowadays. However, the function across all of these is pretty much the same. It just kind of varies as to what aesthetics you like, and additionally, how much coffee you ultimately want to brew. You will notice that this one in the center here is significantly larger than these two. Now, we're going to be focusing on this one today, but again, you can take these principles to really any Moka Pot that you have. Now, the Moka Pot is a decently old brewer. The Moka Pot was invented around 1933. It is Italian in origin, and the company Bialetti is one of the first companies to really put this brewer into high production and really proliferate it across Italy and also across the world. You'll see Bialetti and their lovely little Moka Pot brewer man right on top here. The Moka Pot brewer is primarily powered by steam. It is a brewer that doesn't really need a lot of other gadgets. You need coffee, you need water, and you need a heat source, preferably a stovetop of some type. However, let's break into this. Your Moka Pot is going to break down into 3 different distinct sections. The first one is going to be your base, right here. Pretty simple. It's a base for water. This is going to be what sits on top of your stovetop. The only thing that's really notable about this is that you have this little like pressure gauge right here. But beyond that, this is for holding your water. The next thing you have is going to be your filter basket. This is going to be what your coffee goes into. As you can see, you have your kind of first level of filtration with a little metal filter here at the bottom. This little extension down here is what goes into the water, and all your water is going to travel up through this and then get dispersed through the bed of coffee that's going to be sitting in here. And then you have your top chamber. If you look inside, you'll see this kind of continuation of an extension inside with 2 holes on either side. This is where your coffee is going to come out of once it's been pushed up through all the different chambers into your top brewing area. And then it's just kind of a nice basin to collect your coffee into. These 3 sections generally will just screw together very easily. Now, the Moka Pot is a brewer that doesn't necessarily have a lot of rules, and it's one of those brewers that, similar to like the Vietnamese Phin or even kind of like the French press in some ways, you can kind of eyeball some components of this and you can kind of use your gut instincts to brew with it. So I'm gonna get some coffee ground. We're gonna talk about brewing. I'll be right back.
I want to give a huge thank you to Trade Coffee for sponsoring today's video. Trade is a coffee subscription service that makes it easy to discover new coffees and roasters from all over the US. With over 55 roasters and over 450 unique coffees to choose from, there's something for everyone. My most recent bag from Trade is this Colombian coffee from Broadcast in Seattle, Washington. With notes of marzipan, chocolate, and cherry, I've been brewing it as a pour-over as well as on espresso because it's always such a treat to find a coffee that performs well on both brewing methods. One of the other great parts about Trade is that you can set your delivery on a schedule that works best for you, whether you're crushing multiple bags a week or sipping a little bit slower. The coffee arrives freshly roasted to your front door, and all you have to do is figure out how you want to enjoy it. Right now, Trade is offering one of their best deals if you're ready to get started. Head over to drinktrade.com/MDC to sign up and save $15 on select plans. Plus, you'll get your first bag for free. That's drinktrade.com/MDC or the top link in the description.
Welcome back. Let's brew some coffee. All right, so I have some coffee ground here, and you'll notice that it is pretty fine. This is definitely not as fine as I would grind for like espresso. However, it is a good deal finer than I would grind for like a pour over. I would honestly say I'm splitting the difference between those 2 methods of brewing here. Your mileage will vary on what grind size. However, I think starting in a a more fine position and then easing up if need be is usually what I do. Now, on the mention of coffee, with the Moka Pot, I tend to lean towards somewhat more traditional profiles of coffee and roasting styles when I'm brewing on the Moka Pot. You can 100% get delicious cups of coffee from the more kind of modern specialty roast levels. So things that are lighter, things that are roasted to show a little bit more nuance from the green coffee, that acidity and florals and all that stuff. You can definitely brew that in a Moka Pot. However, starting off, if you're looking for success right off the bat, going for something that's more of a medium, a little bit more of a traditional, like chocolatey, dried berry, like that sort of flavor profile tends to, I think, perform better in this specific type of brewing. Again, not a hard and fast rule, just like a good starting point. But enough talking, I would like to drink some coffee, so let's get started. Now that you have all of your pieces separated, the first thing I like to do is add my water into the base. I'm gonna add water right up till under this little pressure gauge. You don't wanna go beyond and submerge that, but you can go right up to the bottom here. Now, some people will do this with cold water. Kind of the general consensus, and what I also like to do, is to preheat my water prior to putting it into the base. So I've got some water in my kettle that is sitting, I believe, around like 200 degrees Fahrenheit, which, let me find out, which is like 95-ish degrees Celsius, 95, 96. So easy enough, we put our water in. I like to do this first because there are a couple other steps we have to do, including preparing our coffee prior to brewing. So while we do that, this water will cool down a good bit, but it will still be nice and warm so that once we get to that stovetop and begin the brewing process, we aren't starting from square zero. This brew will happen in a nice, reasonable amount of time. So let's move that station off to the side. Now we have our coffee. Now, one of my, not a chief complaint, but one of the most tricky things about a Moka Pot is the fact that this stand is not really meant for standing. Like, you can kind of get it to do it when it is empty. However, when you start trying to fill it with coffee, you definitely need to be holding this. There are quite a few contraptions and gizmos and like 3D printed designs that you can find online that are actually made to be stabilizers. So you can just like set it down in your gizmo and then fill it up with coffee. I do not have one of those, so we will go the old-fashioned way. We will hold our filter basket. Now again, I've got my freshly ground coffee here. The goal here is not to overfill the basket. We're just gonna fill it up just about to the top, and we're gonna kind of settle and distribute our coffee. Even though we've got a fine grind on this coffee, even though we are making it into a shape that feels like an espresso puck, one thing to note about Moka Pots is that you don't actually need to tamp down your coffee. You'll want to kind of level it and distribute it evenly into this filter basket. However, you don't want to apply additional pressure like you would an espresso puck. So once you've got it full, give it a little shake, level off the top. You may get a little bit of grounds fall out just because we have a metal basket here, and that is fine. You can just kind of discard and continue on. If you're having trouble distributing, a couple gentle taps around the edge should do the job. All right, once we have this ready, simply pop it in there. And now carefully, we're gonna screw on the top. Now remember, you have hot water in this base, which means this base has heated up a good bit, so just be cautious when handling this all. Or be like me and just kind of grab it. All right, let's take this over to the stovetop. Okay, before we turn on the heat, let's talk about a couple of things. Regarding heat, we're gonna wanna be keeping this brew pretty much on the lower half of your heat range. I don't find myself ever really going over like what I would consider medium. We might start out at a medium, but we're gonna be controlling it down as the brew begins. One of the things we wanna keep an eye on here is making sure everything doesn't sputter out of control too fast and that we get a nice, somewhat even extraction. Again, this is a little bit of a game as you can't really see what's happening in the brew chamber, but we can see what's happening on the top. So when you start brewing, make sure you keep that lid open so you can keep an eye on it. Now, let's get our stovetop on. All right, so I have it at kind of a true medium right now. I think a good indicator of this is you don't ever really want to see the flames like licking around the edges of the base of your Moka Pot. You really want them just kind of encompassing the bottom there. While our water is preheated, it is going to take a couple minutes to reach that full like steaming potential. And so for a little bit, nothing much is gonna happen, but you do wanna keep an eye on this. Once we see coffee, you'll usually begin to hear kind of a hissing, like bubbling sound about probably 15 to 30 seconds before you're gonna see coffee. And then once you see coffee, we're gonna bring that heat down a little bit in order to stop it all from sputtering out too quickly. You'll know your brew has reached its end once you see it begin to sputter truly and for it to be more air than it is coffee. At that point, we're gonna turn off the heat and then we'll just pull our Moka Pot off, let it cool a little bit, and then we can drink it. All right, I'm beginning to hear the sounds of steam, and here's our coffee. All right, again, so I'm gonna bring the heat down just a little bit. See that coffee flow begin. I kind of wanna maintain that speed. I don't want it sputtering out too soon. Nice and even, nothing too dramatic happening. If dramatic things are happening with your Moka Pot, something is wrong. All right, and with that sputtering, close the lid, take it off the heat. Okay, let's let this cool and let's taste it a little bit. All right, and there you go. You have a nice steaming pot of coffee. Now I will note that coffee, oh, bye cat. I will note that Moka Pot coffee initially is very hot, so take caution when drinking it immediately after brewing. However, I rarely listen to my own advice, so let's have a go at it. Now, one of the things that is very iconic and also unique about Moka Pot coffee is that it has a very distinct style to it. You'll notice that we haven't got a whole ton of coffee brewed in here. However, what is brewed is very intense in flavor. It also has a pretty distinct mouthfeel to it. Similarly to like a French press, for example, because we're relying mostly on metal filters here, and of course we're using finely ground coffee, there is the inevitability that some of that coffee is gonna make its way up into the final cup. This results in a cup that is kind of a little bit chewy, perhaps. It has a very thick texture to it, and additionally, the flavor is very robust. Moka Pot coffee is known to sometimes be considered a substitution to espresso. Again, this is not true espresso. This is not brewed under enough pressure to be qualified as espresso. However, the intensity of the flavor and all of those components, when you pair it with milk, you can get something somewhat similar to a latte. And in fact, if you really like rich, intense, traditional espresso, you'll probably like Moka Pot coffee. That was enough talking. I think it's probably cooled enough. It's unique, it is very distinct, and it's also very recognizable as this brewer's coffee. I think if you are very used to a more modern take on like filter coffee, this might be a little bit more of an acquired taste to you. However, I think it's a really, really fun look tradition in coffee and in brewing. And I think once you learn how to brew the way you like, there's a lot to appreciate here. That was kind of your base overview of how to brew with a Moka Pot. Before we wrap up today, let's talk about a few tips and tricks that you can do and mess around with to possibly improve your brewing experience. One thing I will note, this is not necessarily a tip or a trick, but it's just a passing thing that I wanted to say, is that you can definitely fill up your filter basket with coffee with it resting inside the water chamber. It seems like the obvious way to do it. I will say if you're doing that, I think it makes it a lot more difficult to evenly like level and distribute your coffee. You have to rely a lot more on like kind of using a spoon or another tool to tap or distribute everything down, just because you have water down here, and if you start doing this, and like you're sloshing stuff around. So just a note, you can do that. It does make some other steps a little bit trickier. Now, as we just talked about, the flavor profile and the mouthfeel of Moka Pot coffee is very distinct. However, there are some ways to clean it up a little bit. You may notice this filter basket on top seems like the perfect size for a very particular type of filter, that being a little AeroPress filter. Now, you of course very easily can just set your AeroPress filter on top here. These filters will work for most larger sized Moka Pots. You can wet it down to have it adhere to the coffee bed. Now you can use a tiny bit of water just over the top, just to make sure that filter doesn't scoot around too much when you're screwing on the top. And And then you're providing a nice additional, more controlled level of filtration beyond just whatever metal filters you have inside. I find when you're using primarily metal filters, you are kind of at the mercy of them more so than anything else. Now, another thing you can do when brewing Moka Pot coffee that will potentially improve your brew is that you can kind of cool off and stop the extraction very quickly once you're done brewing. Once you take this off of the stovetop, once your brewing is done, the water down here still very hot. You're still generating steam. There's still a lot going on. In order to stop that, you can simply either run this base under some cold water by taking it to your sink and very carefully doing this. Again, remember, at this point you will have hot coffee in the chamber, so it's more a game of being very gentle and careful here. However, if that seems a little bit too nerve-wracking to you, or you don't trust your own skills there, which I don't blame you, I don't either, you can have maybe a bowl of water on the side that you simply dunk it down into, and then you're good to go. And the last tip I'll give with your Moka Pot is that if you have not added an AeroPress filter in here, if you are at the mercy of those metal filters and you find you're getting a good amount of fines and silt and all of that stuff in this upper chamber, one of the things you can do is allow your coffee to cool slightly in this upper chamber and then pour very slowly into your serving cup. All of that coffee and grounds and anything that has made its way up is going to inevitably sink to the bottom of the chamber, and if you can pour slowly, you will avoid getting a good amount in that cup. Additionally, on that note, I don't recommend just kind of like pouring it all out. Like, you'll probably want to leave a little bit of your coffee in this upper area, as that's going to be the most chewy, kind of mucky part of this all. But that all being said, this is the Moka Pot. This is an iconic brewer. It is traditional and wonderful and pretty easy to use once you get the hang of it, and I think it's lovely. It tickles me to use one of these, and it's really fun to talk about. So I hope you had fun today. I hope you potentially learned something. And additionally, if you have any tips or tricks or even stories about your use with Moka Pots, I would always love to hear them down in the comments below. Regardless, my name is Morgan. You can find me here on YouTube on Fridays. Additionally, you can also find me on YouTube Shorts on random days. I'm also on TikTok or Instagram almost every single day. So with that being said, I hope you all have a great week. I've got a little cup of coffee I'm still gonna be sipping, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye everyone.